Well, hello. I'm coming to you this week outside of the home office. So we're truly trying to give you a sense of all the different parts of our home office. So we have a little porch outside of that, and it's uh, it's not super sunny, but it's also not rainy. And so I thought, let's do this outside. And I'm hoping that the sounds of nature and construction happening a few doors down and some neighbor dogs is not distracting, but is instead beautifying to the whole experience of doing this outside. I wanted to reflect on the gentleness of God. Uh, in this season, I think that this is an aspect of God's character that we are desperate for. I am desperate for it. I feel my need for gentleness to increase in all areas of my life. And that begins, I think, with recognizing gentleness as a fundamental character of God. God is gentle. And I think that we see this best in all of the imagery throughout Scripture where God is defined as a shepherd. He's described as a shepherd, and we, his people, are his sheep. And this shepherd-sheep relationship is one of gentle leading, kindness, gentleness. These are deep character traits of God. And I think there's an invitation, as God is gentle with us, for us to remember to be gentle with ourselves. Now, I've actually seen quite a bit of this being posted on Facebook, Twitter, things like that, as advice for us in this time of disruption, to not be overly harsh with ourselves, but to be gentle with ourselves. Sometimes this comes in the form of just kind of accepting whatever behavior it is that you're doing in order to cope with the challenges of this time. And I think that might be a little bit of a troubling piece of advice, to simply accept and be permissive with whatever, you do whatever you need to do to get by. I think that could actually lead to some pretty damaging behavior if we're not careful. And so gentleness is different than permissiveness. Maybe that's the distinction that I would make. But at the same time, our permission to be gentle with ourselves is based on the rock-solid foundation that God, first and foremost, is gentle with us. He is our good shepherd. There are a number of passages where this imagery is used. Probably most famously Psalm 23, the Psalm of the Good Shepherd, and John 10, where Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd." And he goes on to describe what the good shepherd does for his sheep, that he protects them, that he ultimately lays down his life for them, that he knows his sheep and they know his voice. It's a picture of intimacy, of care, and ultimately of this incredible sacrifice, that Jesus is the good shepherd who, out of love and care for his sheep, lays down his life for his sheep so that they can have life. It's the ultimate protective, caring, selfless, gentle act for his sheep. So our gentleness that we show ourselves in this time is not a permissiveness to do whatever you need to do in order to cope. But it is a gentleness that is based on God's being gentle with you. That as you go through your day and as you react out of frustration, as you respond in anger, when love is what we're called to respond to, when we recognize those moments, the invitation there, I think, instead of to beat ourselves up and to say, "Oh, I got to do better next time," is to remember that God is our gentle shepherd in those moments. He, on the cross, has already taken care of our sin. He has defeated sin. He has invited us into this new life. And that's the basis on which he is gentle with us, leading us into this life of abundance. And so when you experience these moments of frustration with yourself, right, reacting in ways that you wish you didn't, pause remember God's goodness to you. Remember that your sin is already forgiven. Confess it and move on. That's one of the parts of this lovely little book, Brother Lawrence's Practicing the Presence of God, that I love, is the way that he in no ways pretends that he's without sin, or that as he practices God's presence, he somehow becomes a person who is completely free of sin and never stumbles, never acts out in frustration or anything like that. But it's when he does, the way that he responds to these acts of sin, these acts of frustration, these responses that are ungodly, it's how he responds to that with a gentleness that is reflective of God's gentleness towards him. So I just want to read a paragraph here. This is a letter that a friend of Brother Lawrence's wrote about him. He says this: Brother Lawrence was aware of his sins and was not at all surprised by them. That's my nature, he would say. It's the only thing I know how to do. But he simply confessed his sins to God without pleading with him or making excuses. And after this, he was able to peacefully resume his regular activity of love and adoration. If Brother Lawrence didn't sin, he thanked God for it, because only God's grace could keep him from sinning. This way of responding to our own sin and our own impulses or reactiveness is reflective to me of an understanding of God's gentleness with us. That God is our good shepherd. He is gentle with his sheep. So this week, I think the community groups are going to be doing Lectio Divinas on either Psalm 23 or John 10. And would encourage you to do the same. We're going to continue to gather and connect on Sunday mornings in our community groups throughout the week. I think we're going to continue to experiment with ways of walking together in Scripture and reflecting on Scripture and what it means for us in this time. So continue to look out for that email on Saturday, and that'll have whatever links you need will be in that email. And continue to reach out to each other, pray with each other, pray for each other. Extend the gentleness that God shows to us, not only to yourself, but to each other. I mean, I think that's the natural outworking of this, that as we experience God's gentleness towards us, his grace, it starts to work its way into our lives. In fact, gentleness is one of the fruits of the Spirit. It's one of the evidences that God's Spirit is at work in us, is that we become people who are more and more gentle, not only with those around us, but also with ourselves. Recognizing that God, he leads us and he guides us into these green pastures, right? This imagery of abundance and life, which feels sometimes right now pretty far away. But if I can stop and breathe, if I can remember as much of that Psalm 23 as I can, and I would encourage you, try to memorize it. It's short, it's very memorizable. I can remind myself that I am, in fact, one of these sheep that is led out into green pastures, that is led to rest beside cool waters, to have my soul restored. And all of this is work that God is doing. It's not something that I have to conjure up. It's not something that I have to work my way into. All of this is work that God, our Good Shepherd, does and leads us into. So, may you know in the depth of your soul the gentleness of God. May that transform the way that you are gentle with the people that you are living and working with. And may it transform the way in which you are gentle with yourself. Peace. Bless you all. I miss you all. I love you.